How many books have you written?
50.
Did you, when you wrote your first book, did you think you would be writing a second book?
Yes.
When you wrote your second book, did you think you'd be writing like 10 books?
I had no idea what the number would be, but because I love to write, of all the things that I do, that's probably what I love the most. I knew that I would at least be attempting to write more books. Whether or not anybody would publish them, who knows. But when you have the mindset of a writer, you have to write. And so I was writing articles, I was writing scripts, screenplays, manuscripts for books, whatever. I just love to write. And so I knew I'd be writing something.
Did you know this about yourself early in life?
Yes.
And when you say you love to write, what is it about it that you have that passion and that feeling, that comes out around it? What is it about that practice?
There aren't a whole lot of things that introverts can do that other people will let them do as introverts. Writing is one of them. I love to be alone. I love the space, I love the quiet, I love the ability to sit there and think and to ponder, and in my case to gather a lot of data and try to fit it together and see how it makes sense and what it says about where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. And so for me, the whole process of writing and working with words and trying to imagine what's somebody going to think when they read this paragraph. Could they misread it? Will it be helpful? Is it confusing? All of those things, it's odd, but I really enjoy thinking about that. And
do you like going over your work over and over and re-editing it yourself?
I do, but my wife says I don't write books, I explode books. So I'll typically write a book in 2 weeks.
I see.
So I just sit down, I don't start it until I can't contain it anymore. It's up in my head and I got to get it out.
Okay.
And so I sit down, and for 2 weeks we just cancel everything, and I'm there 16 hours a day just doing my 2-finger typing thing. And after I write a chapter, I'll take an hour off, I'll come back, I'll reread it, I'll edit it, I'll shred it, I'll do whatever I need to with it. But once I'm done with that chapter, I don't go back to it. It's done.
Okay.
And so I've never read a book that I've written after I've turned it in.
Still to this day?
To this day.
It doesn't interest you?
I've done it. I want to go on and explore.
This is how musicians and movie makers talk a lot of times, right? That's
I think
like,
so.
I don't
Yeah.
want to care about listening to it, or I did that show, and it's fascinating. I think people that don't have that makeup find that difficult to relate to. Do you think
we're both musicians,
Right,
and
right.
we play, and it's
Right.
like, but I did that already.
Right.
Now I want to explore some new territory.
Right.
I learned something from that, and that's good. Let me build on it.
Right. How do you feel about the fact that the world is run by extroverts as an introvert?
Well, it's got to be. I'm not going to do it. People like me. Well, to be honest, like probably 40% of real leaders are introverts.
Absolutely.
So, we lead differently. I think we tend to be much better as team players because we recognize there's a lot of the leadership function that we can't do. It's just not who we are. Whereas a lot of the extroverts I've studied who are in positions of leadership think they can do it all.
Do you think that a lot of writers are introverts? The people that are actually writers, like you would describe, you bring a lot of passion to that. They find that that's part of their world. It's closer to them.
I think the good writers are.
Yeah.
Because they're willing to just live with that.
Yeah.
They don't need other people telling them, wow, that's really good.
Yeah.
Or, gee, we need that.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't care. I needed to do this.
Yeah.
I believe it will help people, and, the results are up to God. We'll see what He does with it.
So when you, as an artist, have the attitude of like, I don't need your approval, I did this for myself, and then it goes to a group of editors.
No. I don't do it for myself all the time. There's a part of it but I'm doing this because I want to help people. I can't help them through my personality because I just don't have that.
You're difficult?
Give and take stuff. I'm an idiot. I'm a jerk. I'm not that much fun to be around.
I see.
So, given that that's what it is, and I've learned to live with that, Nevertheless, I know that my purpose on earth is to bless people, it's to help people, it's
Okay.
to grow people. And I've got to figure out, so what's the mechanism that God's created for me to do that? Writing, I think, is that mechanism. And so when I'm writing, I may do it, and I may not consult you, I may not care what you say about it, but I'm going to give 110% of my effort to making sure that what I'm giving you is absolutely what I think you will be helped by,
Right.
you'll grow through. And so it's the best that I can do at this point in my development to help you grow based on where I know that you're at.
So when, as I was saying, when that project then goes to a group of editors,
Before you were so rudely interrupted.
how do you manage that emotionally then when other people get their hands on your work?
There's a little bit of it where it's like, well, I want to hear your feedback because you may see some things in there that I missed, and that's helpful. You may be able to make this better, and I want that. But I've also discovered that a lot of editors are wannabe writers, and they don't have the opportunity or whatever it is. And so they're trying to make it their book. And suddenly my voice is lost and their voice is crowding me out. That I can't deal with. And so
you have to, I think distinguishing that, particularly for a new writer, is challenging,
Sure.
and maybe they just have to go through it a couple times before they figure out, oh, this person's crowding me out.
well, and for a new writer, you don't have any leverage.
Exactly.
So you got to put up with some of that.
Right.
And as a new writer, man, the second book I wrote, I wrote something that was controversial, but I thought it was really good. And the lady who was the editor on it got it, and she's the kindest lady in the world, but she just shredded this thing. And I was used to that because all my graduate school professors
Right.
used to do that. It's like, okay, bring it on. I'm here to be educated. That's good. It hurts, but good. I'm growing. But she decimated this thing, and it was wonderful because everything she said was right, and she wasn't trying to make it her book. She said, I think what you're trying to say is this, and I
Right.
think maybe a better way you could say it, and it still be you, is this way.
Yes.
What do you think? It's like, oh, God bless you, woman. You're absolutely right. That was fabulous. I love editors like that.
Yeah.
But, people who are doing, 30, 40 books a year, because you got to turn it out if we're going to have our 600 books coming out of the publishing house this year.
Yeah.
Sometimes that doesn't work so well.
Yeah. What are you working on now? What are you writing or thinking about writing?
There are 4 or 5 books that I'll be doing in the next 12 months.
I think people find this amusing that people carry books around in their heads like this, like you have 4 or 5.
Oh, well,
Well,
that's all I know. Yeah.
It's fascinating.
The next one I'm writing, next month I'll actually be writing my first novel. So that should be done by the first of the year. First couple of months then I'll be working on a book with David Barton,
Okay.
where we're going to talk about where America's at today, what can we learn from the history of the country in terms of where we go in the future. Then I'm going to write a book with Jimmy Myers, who's a counselor, family and child counselor here in Austin, actually. Great guy. He's written some books. And we're going to be talking about why ministry to children is the most important ministry there is. And then there's a political book that I'm going to write.
Sounds like you were, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, based on a lot of the research that I'm doing right now. I've got a couple of different ways that I'm doing research, but we're doing a lot of work with pastors around the country, and I'm just starting a couple of projects with voters around the country. So all of that will come together into a book. There's another one that I'm kind of toying with, which is, for lack of a better way of putting it quickly, it's like Barna's greatest hits.
Okay.
Over 30 years, I've researched virtually everything related to ministry.
Right.
And the idea was to put together a book that weaves it all together into a philosophy of ministry that will help people to better understand, all these disparate things that I put out there. They're not supposed to be onesies.
Yeah.
They're meant to be seen as a holistic understanding of how God's called us to help people grow. And so that's part of it. And then I'm still wrestling through, but I know it will wind up being a book. I don't know if I'll write it in the next year, but one about brokenness.
What's that? Why is that of interest?
It's the missing link in the growth of the American church.
We discussed this before, so talk to me about this a little bit. What that means to you. What does brokenness mean?
Americans want comfort. They want convenience. They want simplicity. They want they want choice. Those are the kind of the new values that are creeping in. And so when you tell them but the only way that you will actually grow to be the person that God wanted you to be is to allow him to break you of sin, self, and society. We don't want to hear that, because our culture, which is where we get most of our education, tells us brokenness is for losers. If you become broken, you've lost the game. You're weak. Who wants to be with a loser or a broken person? And God says, but the only time that I can really make you, mold you, shape you into who I see you as becoming is when you allow me the privilege of kind of reinventing you. And the way that he does that, I know from the research in that book that I wrote called Maximum Faith, it talks about crisis is God's way of breaking us. But in our society, we say, no. The thing you do with the crisis is you overcome it. And God says, no. I allowed that crisis so that it would give me the opportunity, if you'll let me, to shape you into who you could be, so that you become a lover of God and a lover of mankind. And if you let me work through you in that way, through surrender and submission, and then being able to love, you'll go places very few people go, but you will change the world in ways that you can't even imagine changing it right now. But instead, we want to dictate our own path of how I'm going to make a difference, how I'm going to change the world, how I'm going to, leave my mark. And it doesn't work, because it's not God's plan. We're constantly fighting it, and we will fight it until we allow him to break us.
So has this grown out of your own personal process over the last few years?
Well, partly. It grew initially out of the research, and then the research was such an eye-opener for me of this process of how does God transform us, and so I started to go back to God and say, okay, well, I'm stuck on stop 6 of the journey. Stop 7 is brokenness. You've given me plenty of crises. I've rejected them all. Now I understand you have to do that to get me to where I need to go. Break me. And he did. And it is painful. It is no fun. It causes you to sit back and question everything all over again. But, boy, you do grow. And if you want to keep going, you've got to maintain, you've got to stay in touch with that brokenness, because that's the key thing now to recognize. And it's not about me. Never has been about me. I know it was Rick Warren's opening line in his book, but I mean, to really grasp what that means in American society is very, very difficult.
How do you manage your spiritual life while being public?
I try not to be very public. I don't enjoy interviews. I don't enjoy being in front of people and speaking. I don't enjoy anything with a group of people. I'm
not having very much fun myself. Go ahead.
Well, good. My magic is working.
Exactly.
I do well with individuals who I get very close to, and I maintain those relationships for long periods of time. And because of the trust that we have there, and I think part of the selection process that goes on in my mind is this is a person who's serious about growing. That's good. I want to be with them, and let's take the journey
That's
together.
a touchstone for you.
Yeah.
And credibility.
Yeah.
Okay, just quickly before we wrap this up, what are some things that, things change quite quickly now? What used to take 10 years now is it feels to me like it's in a 3-year window or something, I don't know.
Or less.
People that are coming in and wanting and aspiring to write, they have the same kind of drive and pull as you do, and maybe they feel called and so on. What do they need to know?
That it's an incredibly difficult way to make a living or to minister because of the changing nature of the environment, the writing environment. The writing isn't the hard part. Getting people to notice that you've written something is the hard part. Because the publishing industry itself is in total flux, trying to figure out where it's going to be 5 years from now. Advances are shrinking, fewer books are being published through conventional publishing means, more books are being self-published, more e-books are being produced than ever. All of that represents significant change. So you're probably going to have to surround yourself with a team of people who can help you navigate all these new, landmines that are out there. So you're probably going to need an agent. You're going to need a group of people who will coach and mentor you through the process and encourage you through the process, because it can get really depressing.
Do you think publishers are publishing too many books?
No, I think they're publishing the wrong books. There are a lot of great books that are being written, some of which are not being published by conventional publishers. They're going out via self-publishing or other means, and so I don't think the issue is the quantity of books. I think it's are we just pandering to the lowest common denominator and trying to make people feel really comfortable, and or are we as publishers not seeing ourselves as a business, but seeing ourselves as part of the educational establishment, where we're trying to help people become their ultimate self. That's what I think writing should ultimately do, even if you're writing fiction. There ought to be some things in there that cause you to sit back and say, whoa, let me think about that.
That's what fiction writers say about nonfiction writers. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.